Hi there, I'm Shannon. I was just out here in the apiary today watching some bees. I do that as often as I can. I was taught to do that when I first started keeping bees. Kind of handy and it's fun. But it reminded me of an old legend from over in Western Europe many moons ago. I wanted to share that story with you. But I want to remind you to click like and subscribe and comment. Put stuff in the comment section. My wife and I put this channel up to try to help beekeepers, especially new beekeepers. So if you put things in the comment section, we'll try to reply to them. And some of your questions may get a video to show some examples and answer questions. So try to remember to do that. It's a legend of the telling of the bees. There was an old poem back in 1858 by John Whittier, I think is how you pronounce his name. And it was called Telling the Bees. And it was about a man come back and found a girl singing a song like a lament. Somebody had died and she was putting these black sheets over the hives. They said it was to help the bees mourn. And that's something they would do, is talk to the bees. You go back to old Western Europe, way back in the day, a lot of people had hives. If you go out in the country, most of the people would have at least one beehive. They'd keep them for practical reasons like honey and wax and pollinating the crops. But they had a custom of the beekeeper going out and talking to the bees. And he would tell them different things, especially things about the family and things of importance like births and weddings and deaths. And they thought it was important to tell them about the death of the beekeeper especially. They believed that would keep the bees from absconding or leaving. If there was going to be a change in beekeepers or anything, somebody coming up in the family and took over taking care of the beehives, they'd tell them ahead of time. There was stories back in the day of people, they claim that, well, one guy said he got some bees off of some people whose beekeeper had died, and he said the bees got real sick. And he decided they hadn't mourned yet, so he covered them with a black cloth and let them mourn. And after he did that, he said they got better and thrived. Other people would talk about whole colonies dying off if they didn't get to mourn, or some of them leaving. I don't know, just old stories. Interesting. But in this old legend, they had the tradition of talking to the bees, and there was a story about a man that passed away, and his wife took the responsibility of going out and telling the bees. And they said that the day of his funeral, they were out at the cemetery, the preacher said his words, and while they were having the funeral, these bees flew over, and they hung around over the cemetery for a long time. And when things were done, the bees went back the way they came. And the people of the village and the people that knew the man and his wife, they said those was his bees, and they came back to give him a send-off and bid farewell. It's an interesting story anyway. They say that goes back to the Celts. The Celts believed that the bees were messengers from the afterlife. They actually believed that the bees knew when somebody passed, and that those bees would come and escort the soul out of the house. It's interesting, some of the old traditions and folklore and things that people believed. Beekeeping goes way back. They said the ancient Egyptians, they believed that the bees were created from the tears of Ra, the sun god, and his mother, the goddess Neith, was the goddess of wisdom, war, hunt. That kind of relates to the bees, the wisdom part, because bees are pretty amazing if you watch them long enough. They actually found honey. They found some jars when they were excavating, when they were looking into King Tut's tomb. They found these jars and they were sealed, and when they opened them up, they were full of honey. And they tested the honey, and it was good. They said it was as fresh as when they put it in the jar, probably. So when people say honey doesn't have a shelf life, there's some truth to that. If you keep it sealed up, it'll last basically forever, I guess. But that's why the bees seal it with wax. And they don't just seal the cells like they do with brood. Over time, they just keep putting layer wax over that. That's why a full frame of honey looks different. It'll keep, the bees know it'll keep. And it'll keep for as long as they need it to. And it's funny, some of the old customs and traditions and some of the things back in the older ancient religions and stuff. But you can go back, even in Christianity, you go back and they talk about how Solomon, a lot of people said he was the richest man ever lived. I think they really believed that up until, well, probably maybe still, but with all the billionaires in the world, I don't know if it's still true or not, but they said he would have had to have massive apiaries to supply honey and wax and pollinate crops and everything. And they did find hives, man-made hives. They said it's the oldest example of man-made hives keeping bees that they found so far. They go back to like 900 BC, and there were these tubes. They were made out of clay and straw, and they were about 12 inches in diameter and about 2.5 feet long, and they would stack them in rows up to like 3 feet high. And they had a hole in one end for the bees to go in and out, and on the other side they had a plug. And when it was time, they'd unplug that tube and they'd harvest the honey out of there, put the plug back, and the bees would fill it back up. And they found these tubes, they opened them up and they still had some comb and stuff in them. They said that's the oldest example they've found so far of beekeeping. It goes way back. Beekeeping's been around for a long time, a lot longer than some people think, I believe. But yeah, you go back, even the Bible, it talks about the land of milk and honey. Honey represented, you know, abundance. It also represented things of great value. The interesting thing of that was there's this woman back in the day, her name was Deborah. And she was a prophetess, a judge, a songwriter, a military leader, and she was actually the only woman listed in with all the judges, and she was the only woman in the old Jewish tradition known as a military leader. And she, after this one guy came, Barak, he was one of the military leaders, and he came to her for counsel about a battle coming up, and she actually went out to the battlefield and helped him strategy, helped him guide the troops and everything in winning the battle, and they did. And after the battle, she wrote a song about it. So she was a songwriter too. And it's interesting, what does that have to do with keeping bees? Well, like I say, they believed that the bee represented things of great value, great worth. And being that women, back in those days, it wasn't like it is now. Back in those days, women didn't have the kind of prominence in that stuff. They weren't associated with judges and military battles. So for them to list her in the old Jewish history says something, that she was to them of great value. And it's interesting because you look at her name in Old Hebrew, Deborah, you translate that into modern English, it means bee, as in honeybee. So yeah, beekeeping is an old tradition. It's been around for a long time. The jars of honey they found in King Tut's tomb, they said was about 3,000 years old. The beehives they found in Israel were back to 900 BC, and they know beekeeping was around a long time. So it's kind of a neat tradition that we carry out. But I sit down and watch the bees as often as I can. When my wife and I first started keeping bees over 10 years ago, and we were taught from the beginning to observe the hives and watch the landings, especially when you're doing an inspection. Before you smoke them or take the cover off, watch what they're doing. After you do that, you've disturbed them, they're not going to act the same. If you can watch the landing, you can learn a lot about what's going on in the hive. You'll see the pollen coming in. You'll see washboarding, which is an interesting thing that a lot of people still debate what that is. They'll put their little head down and kind of rock back and forth. Some people think they're cleaning. Some people think they're coating it with wax or propolis or something. Some people will tell you that they don't do it outside of the hive, or they don't do it inside the hive. They only do it on the outside, but I figure a lot of people with observation hives, myself, I had an observation hive for a few years. Kind of like to have another one again. It's fun to watch them not only outside but inside, but I've actually seen them inside on the sidebars of the frames, washboarding there. So yeah, just little things they do. It's interesting. But another thing I've seen that a lot of people don't know about, I believe, you'll see them bringing in the pollen, but during a heavy nectar flow, you'll see a house bee on the porch and a forager come in, and they'll actually transfer the nectar from their honey sacs from the forager to the house bee. And then the house bee will go back in and put the nectar away in the honeycomb while the forager goes off back to forage some more. And it's really efficient that way. It's kind of like a warehouse. Somebody will deliver the stuff and the warehouse worker will go put it away where it belongs while the delivery person goes and gets more and brings back. Just the efficiency of the honeybees is pretty amazing. Yeah, a lot of people don't even know they do that. I've seen that. That's pretty neat. You'll see them kind of come up head to head, and one of them will caress the other one's head with their front legs, and then their proboscis, they'll transfer the nectar. It's really neat. But you learn a lot from them. And I recommend anybody just sit and watch the bees. They say it's real therapeutic, and I believe it. It is. It's calming, and a lot of the old timers they'll tell you, even working the hives, it's relaxing. And I think the commercial beekeepers today, they probably don't get to do that much. They got hundreds of hives they're shipping back and forth across the country all the time. But most of us, what they call hobby beekeepers, backyard beekeepers, we got time to watch those things, and it is interesting. I know you get in there and get to working with them, it distracts you from a lot of things. It'll take your mind off your troubles, I guess. But yeah, I recommend watching the bees. I can tell you one thing though, make sure you don't get in their entrance. You don't get in their flight path. Right now they're flying around, but they're going around me somewhere. But I remember my first year keeping bees, my wife and I were out watching them. We got the package in and got them put in the colony and the hive and everything, and they say leave them for about a week before you open them back up so they don't abscond. And so it finally came time to go out and do our first inspection, and we were excited, and I wasn't even thinking. I was standing in front instead of on the side, and I was blocking the entrance, and my wife started laughing, and she said the girls are checking you out. I asked her what she was talking about, and she said look behind you. I turned around, there's a big cloud of bees. About 6 inches away from my backside. And they were just waiting for something to get out of the way, and I seen it and I moved out of the way, and they all went to the landing. It's pretty neat. It's kind of funny. So yeah, don't get in their way, just you hold them up. But watch the bees. It's good therapy, and you learn a lot. And while you're watching your bees, I guess I told you all that to say this. While you're watching your bees, if you find yourself talking to them, don't feel too weird, because you're not going to be the first. And I thank you for stopping by. Remember to like and subscribe and comment. See you next time. Thank you.